It seems like we are seeing this kind of broad consumption downgrade in China, whether it's cyclical or structural. Do you expect this trend to continue?
I think when you talk with people on the ground here and when you look at what's happening out in the retail shops, really you see a large number of people who are looking for a reason to believe in a future recovery. They're not yet seeing enough, I think, things in the broader economy to start opening up the wallets maybe as quickly as we'd like them to. But you see, I think, this cautious optimism where they want to see more of the, more job stability, more confidence that it's okay to spend part of the money that's been saved through the post-COVID period. And so I think when you look at things like this last holiday, we just came out of Dragon Festival, you saw the city, I live in Shanghai, so the city was definitely out and about. People were spending money in retail, people are spending money in food and beverage, but likely this week when they're back at work, they'll be eating inside and not going out for lunch as much.
Yeah, but Helen, before I bring in Jessica, just one follow-up on that. What are you hearing from your clients, the companies that you advise? Where are they on this spectrum of hope?
Yeah, I think that there's a sense that you need to earn consumer engagement right now. So in the past, I've been in China almost 20 years. In the past, if you had something and you put it on the market, you were fairly confident you could find someone to sell it or to purchase it. But now with all of the competition, there's really a sense of how do you keep your consumers engaged between shopping cycles? How do you, bridge that offline-online environment? I think you're seeing bricks and mortar really looking at how do I create opportunities to bring consumers in, and then how do I convert those consumer engagement moments into online sales after they've left the stores. So I think for
Helen,
the clients that I work with, I was going to say for the clients that I work with, oh, no worries. For the clients that I'm working with, I think they obviously, if you've been in China for a period, we had some great retail activity in the past. I think people are seeing the uptick coming out, particularly in some sectors out of COVID. And I think it's just a little more work than it was in the past, but I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. I think great retail will win in China.
Helen, maybe you could chime in here on, everyone thought when China was going to reopen that we would just, they would just mirror what the U.S. did. This revenge spending, consumption boom. It didn't quite play out that way. Why do you think that is?
Well, you kind of remind me of the joke that everyone is expecting us to revenge spending, revenge traveling, but we're so kind that we don't want to revenge anyone. But I think that it's a key reason is probably people's concerns on their income and future income. Consumer confidence so far remains relatively weak, as opposed to about 125 of where it was, consumer confidence level, national level, back before April 2022. Now we're standing at a barely 88. So this is saying that we still have a long way to cover before we actually go back to the, really strong state or better shape of the consumers. We think that this is partly related to the fact that the excess savings that consumers had in China as opposed to those in the U.S. are not from fiscal subsidy. These are their own money that has been saved because they postponed their decisions to buy properties. So when they're spending their own money, they may not necessarily want to draw on this kind of fund that they saved by, delaying their home purchase plans. And secondly, we also see that the difference partly between China and the U.S. is while we may not see very strong confidence at the moment, we don't necessarily have to worry too much about the actually the wealth effect from the dropping property prices. In the U.S., if property prices drop by 25%, as in China's case, in existing homes already, then we probably would see significant downside to retail. But so far, it's still holding in positive territory. So the reason, in our view, is we think it's because because that China actually has not been offering financial products such as mortgage equity withdrawal to allow people to monetize the capital gain from property price appreciation. And therefore, when property prices come down, they do not have to come up with more cash to pay back their lending, their borrowing. So that's probably why that so far is still holding up okay, but without the government subsidy, they couldn't do much better.
Yeah, and what of the problem is structural post-pandemic? Do we have a better idea of what the structural phenomenon are?
Well, I think it's structural and cyclical at the same time. Okay. Structural in the sense that I believe, especially in certain categories of consumer products, I think the structural changes probably came at the back of a cohort effect, a very strong, millennium and also Gen Z kind of cohort effect, because they choose to actually go for something else. For example, in the past it was usually the foreign brands that are for our generation the representation of quality and also status, and you can show off a little bit and just live a little, right? But for the younger generation, actually they are very much welcoming the Chinese names as well, and the competition therefore has basically been tipped upside down, in the sense that in the past, foreign brands can pretty much just relax, and whatever you present on the counter, people are happily paying. But now the competition is much more fierce, and this is actually exacerbated by a cyclical problem, which is, because of the property sector slowdown, a lot of the capital, a lot of this money that used to be invested in such high return sectors are now having nowhere to go. So they think, okay, consumers or EVs or the lithium battery, these are great sectors, so let's go for it. So the supply go up really quickly, not only in those excess capacity in industrial sectors, but also in beverage and food. Yeah. So when that happens, there is much more competition at the moment. So both cyclical and structural.
Yeah, Jessica, maybe you can chime in. You mentioned there's still opportunities for good retail. What is good retail now? Is it a domestic? Is it an international brand? Is it in the premium segment? I mean, what in your eyes is still doing good and well in the face of all these price cuts that we're seeing in the retail sector?
Yeah, I think consumers are shopping for value these days, right? It's not about cheap everything. It's, if I'm spending on the money on it, am I getting good value? And value, I think the definition of value is really changing in China as well. I think we were mentioning earlier, before people were looking for the biggest label or the biggest brand, and now I think people are looking for performance. I think one of the sectors that you're seeing a lot of movement in from a retail standpoint is anything with health and wellness. So any brand, local or international, that is selling, workout equipment or, outdoor equipment. I think more camping gear has been sold in Shanghai post-pandemic than probably was the decade before, because people are really looking at, how do I get out and camp in the city? If you look along the river in Shanghai on a sunny Sunday, you'll see as many camping tents and picnic tables as you would in a national park in the U.S. I think the city of Shanghai is spending a lot of money on developing parks to encourage people to get back outside. I think you're seeing consumers traveling to natural destinations more than in the past they might have gone on shopping tours. People are really looking at, how do I invest my time to get outside, to enjoy my family, and to live a happier lifestyle, a healthier lifestyle. I think China's really focused on health and wellness these days. And so brands that are in that space, whether domestic or international, I think will do really well.
Yeah, I mean, case in point, and you can chime in on this too, Jessica, if you want. I mean, Luckin Coffee, right, has surpassed your previous company, Xinbake. Is there a future now, or what does the future look like for luxury companies looking to sell to this younger generation? Is there still as bright a future there as, say, 25 years back, when you could just put any bag on the table and people would just outbid each other?
Yeah, I think from my perspective, you're seeing that slow down, because I think they're going to take that money and spend it on, in the case that I was just talking about, they'll spend it on luxury, shoes and hiking stuff. I think one of the things, I was out, we just had the Dragon Boat Festival last week, and I was out looking at what was going on in the streets, and you could see that China had gotten really comfortable at being comfortable. So very few high-heeled shoes. People are wearing, comfortable flats. I think one of the things that indicates that I think people are looking for outcome is a lot of the fashion has gotten a lot more whimsical than maybe it was a year or two. You're starting to see in women's fashion some ruffles and some, floral patterns, and in young men's fashion, sort of oversized puffy sneakers and oversized jeans and things like that. And I think those are indications that people are really looking to enjoy life, not get too stressed out. One other segment that I think is interesting to see coming up is scents and fragrances, and not just as this is my signature scent, like you might have had with Chanel in the past, but now they're looking at this is a scent that is good for my mental health. And so you're hearing things around how do I lead a relaxing life? How do I make sure my kids aren't too stressed out? And so I think things in those segments will be good retail and will continue to grow because they match sort of where the government is going as well.
Yeah.
Okay.
You gave me a lot of ideas for what to give David for Christmas. Something ruffled.
Yeah. Big clown shoes. Looks like it.
It's cyclical. It's cyclical. Someone was mentioning, and you would have to have been in China for a while, that the bubble skirts are coming back. But I think that there's a sense of, people spent a lot of time being very conservative with their money, and they're not opening their checkbook wide, but they're having sort of intentional impulse buys, right? So they'll spend a little on a few days out of the year, but they're going to make sure it's fun when they do it. And I think experiential, anything with concerts or entertainment.